Good evening. Welcome to Hasta las Ocho, your half hour of local and regional news, features, weather, and other information. I'm Mike Clifford. NMPoliticalReport.com reports the New Mexico House Regulatory and Public Affairs Committee passed along party lines a Republican driver's license bill last evening. Sponsors of HB 99, Representatives Andy Nunez, a Republican from Hatch, and Paul Pacheco, a Republican from Albuquerque, presented the bill and told the panel that this was their attempt at compromising on the multiple year-long issue of whether or not to issue driver's licenses to undocumented immigrants. Nunez said since 2010, he's tried to repeal the state law that allows a person to get a driver's license without legal documentation of citizenship. Pacheco said he feels like this compromise will solve the problem, referring to recent news that some federal agencies within the state will no longer accept New Mexico-issued identification cards. Members of the public lined up outside the House chambers to speak out against the bill. Of those against the bill, included David Koss, a former mayor of Santa Fe. Koss said he opposed this version of a driver's license bill because of its strict rules. Under the bill, those who do not qualify for a real ID-compliant driver's license could still get a permit card. Opponents of the bill have said these permits would single out undocumented immigrants. Final vote was 4-3 in favor of the bill. The bill next heads to the House Judiciary Committee. The Pueblo Chieftain reports the term-limited district attorney for the San Luis Valley is hoping to find a home on the other side of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. David Mahoney, a Democrat, announced Wednesday that he was entering the campaign for district attorney in the 3rd Judicial District, which takes in Los Animas and Huerfano counties. A Vail Daily story posted at denverpost.com says a mountain lion entered a Vail resident's patio and killed a 2-year-old dog yesterday, the second such killing in Eagle County in a week. Carrie and Robbie Pearson's Cavalier King Charles Spaniel was taken from the patio of their home on Forest Road near Lions Head Village around 6 a.m. Carrie immediately called the Colorado Parks and Wildlife for assistance when she could not find her dog Mogul, who weighs about 18 pounds. Eagle County Animal Control found the remains of the dog under the deck where the lion was first spotted. And according to the Santa Fe New Mexican, some operations at the federal government's troubled nuclear waste repository in southern New Mexico could resume by the end of this year under a plan approved by U.S. Department of Energy officials, but critics voiced concerns yesterday about whether the facility would be ready to safely reopen. The plan approved by the Department of Energy's field office in Carlsbad addresses recovery activities at the waste isolation pilot plant, day-to-day operations and maintenance, as well as the installation of a ventilation system needed before the underground facility resumes work related to the long-term storage of radioactive waste. More on related information coming up during the Concerned Citizens for Nuclear Safety weekly update later in the show. The new director of the Colorado State Fair is wrapping up her first week on the job. Rocky Mountain Community Radio Station KRCC's Andrea Chalfin has more.
Sarah Cummings comes to the state fair after working with and running various fairs in California. She also at one time was a participant.
I grew up showing animals at the fair, exhibiting, sewing, and baking. Never in a million years did I think that I would be here today. But it's something that just emanates from me. I really love what I do.
Cummings says she sees herself traveling the state and visiting agricultural institutions like 4-H and FFA. She says she's looking forward to the upcoming year to see how the fair has traditionally functioned and then grow from there. For KRCC News, I'm Andrea Chalfin.
A watchdog group is putting the U.S. Department of Energy and its Los Alamos National Laboratory on notice that they must clean up the nuclear and toxic waste at the lab or face a lawsuit. The lab signed a consent order in 2005 agreeing to clean up the waste, but the suit alleges so far it has not complied. Mark Richardson reports.
Nuclear Watch New Mexico has put the federal government and the Los Alamos National Laboratory on notice that it plans to sue over what it contends is the failure to clean up nuclear and toxic waste at the lab site. The watchdog group says the lab hasn't executed its part of a 2005 consent order with the New Mexico Environmental Department to remove the waste. Nuclear Watch Director Jay Coughlin says the group's biggest concern at Los Alamos is a site known as Area G. He says it contains up to 200,000 cubic yards of poisonous debris, much of it left over from the Cold War.
It's a waste dump for both radioactive and toxic materials that dates back to 1957. And the lab plans to simply cap and cover it and leave it forever.
Coughlin says the deadline for the lab to have a cleanup plan in place was last December. The U.S. Department of Energy declined to comment on the suit, but the New Mexico Environmental Department calls Nuclear Watch's claim baseless. The state agency says it plans to work with DOE in Los Alamos to revise the consent order. Coughlin says his group's concerns were raised recently when DOE announced plans for a $1 trillion upgrade of the U.S. nuclear arsenal, with much of that money earmarked to improve the facilities at Los Alamos.
To oversimplify, the nuclear weaponeers are getting ready to create a whole new round of nuclear weapons. Before cleaning up their first mess, they're getting ready to cause another.
He says Nuclear Watch filed a legally required notice with the DOE this week, and if the department takes no action, his group will file suit within 60 days to enforce the consent agreement. For New Mexico News Connection, I'm Mark Richardson.
This is the CCNS News Update, an overview of the latest nuclear safety issues, brought to you every week by concerned citizens for nuclear safety. Here is this week's top headline. DOE gives itself permission to increase plutonium in CMRR without required NEPA analysis. In a weekly report for Los Alamos National Laboratory, LANL, the Defense Nuclear Facilities Safety Board revealed that the U.S. Department of Energy, DOE, and the Semi-Autonomous National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA, have given themselves permission to significantly increase the amount of plutonium allowed in the Chemistry and Metallurgy Research Replacement, CMRR, project radiological laboratory from 8.4 grams to 400 grams, a 46-fold increase without supplementing their environmental impact statements as required by the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA. The increase is substantial, and NEPA requires the federal nuclear weapons agencies supplement their environmental impact statement with opportunity for public review and comment, as well as public hearings. The amount of plutonium is measured in weapons-grade plutonium-239 equivalents. 8 grams is about 1/3 of an ounce, whereas 400 grams is equivalent to a little more than 14 ounces, or nearly a pound. In 2003, the federal agencies proposed the $600 million CMRR project with the release of a draft environmental impact statement. Public hearings were held in northern New Mexico, with the majority of commenters opposing the proposed project that would increase the manufacture of plutonium triggers for nuclear weapons from 20 per year to 50 to 80 per year. Despite public opposition, the federal agencies decided to proceed with construction and operation of 2 buildings, the Radiological Laboratory Utility and Office Building, RLUB, and the nuclear facility. The RLUB was designed and built as an office and utility building with radiological labs in the basement for the limited use of 8.4 grams of plutonium. The nuclear facility was not built, and eventually President Obama put it on a 5-year hold when the cost escalated to $6 billion. The federal agencies designated the RLUB as a radiological facility. In 2011, DOE and NNSA confirmed this fact in their final environment impact statement. They wrote, quote, NNSA would not operate RLUB as anything other than a radiological facility which would significantly limit the total quantity of plutonium and other special nuclear material that could be handled in the building, end quote. Moreover, because the nuclear facility was not built, the federal agencies now want to raise the RLUB radiological designation to a hazard Category 3 nuclear facility in order to increase the amount of plutonium allowed. Such a designation would create more hazards and require structural modifications as well as additional safety, security, and emergency preparedness measures. In response, CCNS prepared a sample comment letter that you can use to demand that the federal agencies supplement their environmental impact statement as required by NEPA. This has been the CCNS News Update. To learn more and to download a sample comment letter, please visit our website at nuclearactive.org and like us on Facebook.
More students are spending more time on smartphones and other digital devices during class, according to a new report from the University of Nebraska. On average, students spend the equivalent of 2/3 of a school year playing with devices instead of paying attention to professors. Eric Galatis has more.
College students spend more class time than ever playing with their smartphones and other digital devices, according to a new University of Nebraska report. The study, which surveyed 675 students in 26 states, found on average students check their phones during class more than 11 times a day. Barney McCoy, the report's lead author, says students aren't just glancing down to see if someone's trying to reach them.
They basically say about 21% of their time is spent either text messaging or checking social media, those kinds of things that really take them away from the discussion or the activities that are taking place in the classroom. That really adds up.
McCoy says for a typical 4-year education, the average student may be distracted for 2/3 of a school year. He says students admit to the downsides of looking at their phones instead of their professors, missing out on lessons, lower grades, and being called out for not paying attention. But he says most students say they can't or won't change their behavior. Students cited boredom as the top reason they turned to their phones during class, and more than 1 in 4 said they had the right to use devices whenever they wanted. McCoy says part of the responsibility falls on professors to use new technology to engage students by challenging them to Google a topic in real time, for example, which can add to the learning experience. But he says the findings suggest students and professors could both benefit by establishing ground rules.
We need to have conversations that build those expectations and try and build a consensus about why we're in a classroom to begin with. And that's hopefully to effectively learn, and if you're a professor, to effectively teach.
McCoy first surveyed students in 2013, and 2 years later, the use of digital devices during class time has increased slightly. In 2015, the number of students who said they never use devices for non-classroom purposes dropped to 3%, compared with 8% in 2013. This is Eric Galatis reporting for the Colorado News Connection.
Only 1 in 5 syringe exchange programs, which have been shown to reduce the spread of disease, are found in rural areas, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. But change could be on the way. Last month, President Obama signed the omnibus spending bill, which includes language to lift restrictions on using federal funds for needle exchanges. Money still cannot be used to purchase needles themselves, but can help pay for staff and other supplies. Jay Carper of Side Effects Public Media reports.
The needle exchange in Fayette County, Indiana, is hidden in a back office at the health department. Paula Maupin runs the exchange. Basically, it's a desk with baskets of everything a drug user needs, apart from the drugs. Syringes, cotton balls, alcohol swabs, even tourniquets.
I struggle with that. I would much rather talk them into going to rehab as opposed to having to do all this, but I know that's not going to happen, so I do it.
Maupin has seen what sharing supplies can lead to. Last year, another rural Indiana county got hit with an outbreak of HIV. The number of cases in Scott County where drug abuse is rampant has topped 180. Fayette County had its own addiction problem, and its rate of hepatitis C was similar to Scott County's.
So that kind of scared us, and we got contacted by the state, and they recommended that we seriously consider applying for a needle exchange. So that's what we did.
But then they hit a barrier. The county couldn't pay for it. Maupin was able to eventually land a small grant, which helped her purchase the supplies she has now. But once business picks up at the exchange, those supplies will not last long.
Don't know what we're going to do. There won't be any money. So I just pray. Do a lot of praying.
Change could be on the way. Last month, President Obama signed the omnibus spending bill. The bill includes language to lift restrictions on using federal funds for needle exchanges. Money still can't be used to purchase needles themselves, but can help pay for staff and other supplies. Daniel Raymond of the Harm Reduction Coalition says this is good news for counties like Fayette.
I'm expecting that a lot of the impact is going to be in more rural and suburban areas that don't have a whole lot of resources but do have some access to federal funds.
After paying for things like roads and schools and jails, rural counties don't usually have a lot of leftover money for something like a needle exchange. But federal dollars could help.
There are several communities across the country who haven't done this but want to do this and are really looking into it. So Ohio, West Virginia, Oregon, etc.
Beth Meyerson heads the Rural Center for AIDS and STD Prevention. She says the change is a good first step. The problem is some states don't take in a lot of federal funds for public health. For instance, in 2014, Indiana was dead last in how much money it took from the CDC on a per capita basis. And even if a state applies for funding, it's not guaranteed to go to rural places.
We'll want to watch. Does it hit the ground, and does it hit the ground in every community that really needs it? Or is it hitting the ground in only metro communities?
Another issue is that a lot of states still don't even allow needle exchanges. Raymond says a number of states are looking to change that this year. And at the federal level, he says there needs to be more money made available for problems stemming from addiction.
So that's going to be a big issue in 2016. Can Congress and the administration come up with more dollars to deal with harm reduction, syringe exchange, to deal with overdose, to deal with drug treatment, to deal with the whole spectrum of issues that Indiana and so many other states around the country are confronting right now?
Back in Fayette County, Paula Maupin worries about people contracting hepatitis C or HIV. The possibility of running out of supplies for the needle exchange, it weighs on her.
I have had so many sleepless nights, waking up in a panic, wondering how on earth I'm going to make this happen.
More money would be a big relief. Jake Harper, Side Effects Public Media.
That story was produced by Side Effects Public Media, a reporting collaborative focused on public health. Sometimes a work of fiction set in the future can tell us a lot about our reality today. Paolo Bacigalupi is a Paonia, Colorado National Book Award finalist who describes a thriller version of possible future water wars in the American Southwest in his latest novel, The Water Knife. The setting is the Southwest U.S. dealing with effects of climate change like severe drought and water shortage, as well as immigration and migration, state militias, income inequality, and more. Is this an impossible scenario, or is it likely?
This is Diana Cordy with Book Talk. My guest is Paolo Bacigalupi. His newest book, his sixth novel, is The Water Knife. Welcome to our program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
As the book opens up, where is your water knife, Angel, and what is his job?
As the book opens, Angel is standing in the middle of a Las Vegas arcology. It's basically a massive integrated sort of housing, work, and entertainment sort of space. I built it literally. In my mind, I was thinking of the casinos that are designed to keep people inside, but these buildings, these arcologies, are designed to be completely sort of environmentally isolated. They bring in water and then they recycle it. They make their own food. Everything happens inside of the arcology. And it's a very low waste environment. And it's also very luxurious. So in the very beginning, he's standing at the top of the sort of hanging gardens of Las Vegas, and he's looking down through the cascaded layers where there's vines and banyan trees and butterflies and water, and it's all beautiful and lush. He's watching a water lawyer sort of try to run all the way up through the levels to meet him. And Angel himself he's a water knife. And what he does is he goes out and he makes sure that places like this arcology with its hanging gardens always have enough water, even though they're in the middle of the desert. And so he's sort of a 007 of water on behalf of Las Vegas and the Southern Nevada Water Authority. He goes out and he gives people offers they can't refuse on their water nights. He blows up water rights. He blows up other people's water treatment plants. He does whatever it takes.
And he has lots of weaponry, as I recall.
Yeah, he's sort of got some guns and things, yeah. He is sort of teamed up with the Nevada National Guard. Early on, they go on a raid with their helicopters, and they go after a water treatment plant, and that's really sort of the beginning of the whole story.
So you've based your novel on the true life issue of disappearing water in the American West. Why this subject matter?
Well, a lot of different reasons. Originally, water was something that I started paying attention to because I worked for an environmental newspaper called High Country News. Yeah, and I was their online editor there. And you knew all these really, really smart journalists who were doing all this really interesting reporting. There was a guy named Matt Jenkins who was doing a lot of reporting on the Colorado River and how there was less and less water in the river and how Lake Powell and Lake Mead were getting lower and lower. And then there are people like Michelle Nijhuis, who was doing a lot of climate change reporting. And, these people are sort of like digging up the details. They're sort of excavating the shape of the future right in front of you. So as a science fiction writer, that's just interesting territory anyway. But the real impetus for writing this book at this moment really came from I was down in Texas in 2011 during their drought. And it was devastating. It was shocking to see how bad it was. Farmers were putting their cattle down. The land couldn't support any crops. You were seeing things like rolling brownouts because there wasn't enough water in the dams to generate hydroelectricity. There wasn't enough sort of hydraulic pressure to generate hydroelectricity. And so water literally was power in this moment when everybody's running their air conditions at max because they were also breaking the record for 100-degree days. It was a stunning sort of space to be in. I actually got heat stroke when I was down there. But the thing about it that really struck me was that like all of the things that were happening in Texas pretty much fit what climate scientists and climate modelers say is the future for Texas. And so in that moment, you realize you're not actually standing in the drought. What you're doing is you're standing in the future. You're time traveling. And you say, oh, so if this is the future, how does it look? And the answer is, it looks scary. But even more than that, the thing that really stood out was that while that was happening in Texas, Rick Perry was the governor of Texas, and a viable presidential candidate at the time was holding these prayer circles and praying for rain and encouraging people to pray for rain. And that really struck me. Here we have this terrible drought that the data tells us we're going to get more and more of. And here you have leadership that's in complete denial, leadership that's involved in magical thinking. And as a writer, where my job is, in my mind, is to say, if this goes on, what does the world look like? If this trend keeps going, what does the world look like? And when I look at those two trends together, this terrible oncoming sort of disaster and leadership that's completely out to lunch, you put those together and you think, oh, okay, I see this. This frightens me. And it was something that seemed real and powerful enough that it seemed worth spending a couple of years working on a book about it.
Texas now is having floods, right?
They are, yes. Their drought is breaking in flood. It's terrible. And next year, California may be in flood as well. If the El Nino events work out the way that, right now, the weather modelers are saying, could very well be that California is drenched, next year. The thing is, and this is the thing where we always confuse the difference between weather and climate. Climate is 30 years of averages, and, the weather, it can go all kinds of ways. The thing that climate change really does is it destabilizes things. It turns out that we really actually need fairly stable weather in order to prosper, and that's key. Statistically, though, the south of the United States and the southwest of the United States can anticipate being, in general, drier and drier and drier. And that's, in fact, what you see exactly when you see Lake Mead getting lower and lower and lower.
How about Colorado?
Colorado, I'm not even sure. I think what I remember reading was that essentially Colorado still should get liquid, but we're going to have less snowpack, which means that we won't be able to count on the same kind of water storage that we have right now. So snowpack is our water storage in many ways. If it all runs down immediately, we don't actually have enough reservoir capacity to hold it all in reservoirs. And so it's this really convenient way to hold water and slowly release it. That's what snowpack, ultimately is for us. And at least in my mind, that's how I think of snowpack, is it's another water storage device. What I understand is that we could get a similar amount of moisture, but it won't be held in the same way. And that has implications for, if you're a farmer or a rancher, or if you're a city trying to plan, your long-term, drought strategies. And this is incredibly geeky, weird, here's a thriller about how big of water storage we build. But anyway.
I found it to be very thoughtful, excitingly written. You write both adult and young adult science fiction.
Yeah.
And which is the most important to you?
it's all important to me. I mean, that's why I do all of these things. Yeah, I write for adults, I write for young adults, I write for kids. I write, what they call middle grade. Yeah,
middle grade.
And I only write a book if it feels like it feels necessary or important or valuable to me in some way. And I'm surprised, actually, sometimes where that bounces around. I wrote a book called Zombie Baseball Beatdown because my wife is a school teacher and she had kids who weren't interested in reading. And I really think that kids should feel like reading is awesome and it's fun and it's as engaging as all the video games and movies and all the other things that they have for media entertainment options. And when my wife asked them what they wanted to read about, they said zombies. And
along those lines, you said that you write about things you care about. You just said.
Yeah.
Climate change, corporate malfeasance, public inattention, and sustainable technology. Mm-hmm. Given those interests, particularly climate change and sustainable technology, how have they changed your daily life?
I just installed solar on my house.
There you go.
I'm actually very excited about this. We're sort of cutting the cord from coal, and that's particularly exciting. All of our coal comes from Tri-State, and our coal electricity comes from Tri-State. And actually, we live in a coal mining region. And there are 3 coal mines up the valley from us. And I'm delighted to actually be able to use some other technology to generate electricity other than burning carbon.
It seems to me really that you write about the unreported story.
I'm interested in the hidden story, the hidden storyline that defines everything, the one that we're not paying attention to, but kind of comes out of nowhere and slaps us upside the side of the head. There's something called a black swan event, which is really interesting to me. Black swans are things that all the experts say can't happen. The 2008 financial collapse is a great example of a black swan. It's like, oh no, we have a perfectly stable financial system. Oops. And I'm really interested in those kinds of things where we assume because, that thing has never happened in the past, therefore we're safe. And I'm really interested in whether or not we're actually gathering all the data, whether or not we're actually seeing all the pieces of the puzzle, whether we're missing something or not. One of the things that really stood out to me when I was working on the water knife was that I talked to somebody at Denver Water at one point, and we were. This was back in 2012 when the drought was happening here in Colorado, and I asked him how many years Denver could last if they were having a drought like the 2012 drought. And he was like, I think we could probably last about maybe 5 years. It would suck, and all the trees would be dead, and there would be a bunch of different impacts, but I think we could squeak it out 5 years. And I asked him, what do you think the chances of that happening are? And he said, it's never happened in the past. He's like, that math is really hard. And that strikes me as being the ideal space for a black swan event.
Well, thank you. My guest is Paolo Bacigalupi, author of The Water Knife, published by Knopf. This is Diana Cordy with Book Talk.
Weather. In north-central New Mexico tonight, partly cloudy, lows 5 to 15. Tomorrow, partly cloudy, not as cool, highs in the upper 30s to mid-40s. West winds 10 to 15 miles an hour tomorrow afternoon. Tomorrow night, partly cloudy, lows 10 to 25. South winds 10 to 20 miles an hour after midnight. Sunday, partly cloudy with a chance of snow showers, highs in the 30s to lower 40s. Southwest winds 10 to 20 miles an hour. Sunday night, partly cloudy with a slight chance of snow showers, lows 10 to 20. Monday, partly cloudy with a slight chance of snow, highs in the lower to mid-30s. Monday night and Tuesday, partly cloudy with a slight chance of snow showers, lows 5 to 15, highs in the upper 20s to lower 30s. Tuesday night through Thursday in north-central New Mexico, mostly clear, lows 0 to 20, highs in the 30s to lower 40s. For the San Luis Valley, tonight partly cloudy, lows 5 below to 2 above 0, except 2 to 11 near the mountains, light winds. Tomorrow, mostly sunny, highs in the mid to upper 30s, light winds. Tomorrow night, mostly cloudy, lows 4 to 11, south winds up to 10 miles an hour. Sunday, partly sunny with a 30% chance of snow, highs in the lower to mid-30s, southwest winds around 10 miles an hour. Sunday night, mostly cloudy with a 10% chance of snow, lows 4 to 10. Monday and Monday night, mostly cloudy, highs near 30, lows 1 below to 5 above 0. Tuesday, mostly sunny, highs near 30. Tuesday night and Wednesday, mostly clear, lows 2 below to 6 above 0, highs in the lower 30s. Wednesday night and Thursday in the San Luis Valley, mostly clear, lows 3 to 11, highs in the mid to upper 30s. Thanks for being here for Hasta las Ocho this evening. I'm Mike Clifford.